Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and we're going to have a great conversation here tonight. Sorry for the delay, scrambling to get everything in order for Missouri and everything we got going on, last minute information and all that. But here I am, so let's go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. How are you doing tonight? Should be good. So yes, last minute planning. We're having our workshop in Missouri this coming weekend for CPI members, and that's going very, very well. There should be some guests there as well as our members, and I'm looking forward to that. But, and then we're trying to get together an event in New York City for July 10th. Your calendar for July 10th. Official announcement coming soon about our New York City forum that we're having. That's going to be quite interesting. So mark your calendars for July 10th, but last minute, just scrambling to get that event together, right? So we got a lot of IRL, in real life activities, and that, things are always changing. And summertime, a lot of people are traveling and it's hard to get spaces, places, and but we just keep marching ahead. We just keep marching ahead. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are doing yet another one of our live streams. And I'm back like I always am. I've been doing these streams on here, and we continue marching ahead. We continue with the city building tendency in our organization. So tonight, just like every other night, the way we do this is I give my opening remarks, which I am doing right now. As I give my opening remarks, I write down your super chat questions. Like I just did. And then after that, I do the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. We find out who it is on the other side of the camera. And then from there, I then answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. That's the way our show works. That is the way our show works. So there you go. That's the way we do it. That's the way our show works. So if you have a question, just like Gleb did just there, send me a super chat. I will write it down. I'll rather type it down. And in the second half of our program, I will answer it. That's the way this works. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and I will jump into my opening remarks for tonight. So here we go. Folks, you are all well aware of the fact that I recently published this book, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. I published this book, and this book continues to get very good reviews on Amazon. You go to the page, you'll see that it has 15 different reviews, all of them pretty much positive. One of them has a slight criticism, somebody who didn't agree with me about China, but every other review underneath this book is positive. And people like this book because this book offers an analysis that you won't find in other places. And I wrote this book as the culmination of years of research and analysis to get us to the point that we're at with the Center for Political Innovation. The analysis that I put forward in that book, this book, I should say, is that we are in a crisis of capitalism. Now, what is a crisis of capitalism? What is it? Some people say, well, a crisis of capitalism is the prison industrial complex. The fact that there are corporations that make profits from locking people away, that's a crisis. Well, absolutely. That's a crisis for the working people who get caught up in it. That's a crisis for the families and the communities that are devastated by it. Corporations that profit from destroying the lives of human beings by locking them away, that is absolutely a crisis, but it is not a crisis of capitalism in the Marxist sense. Some people say a crisis of capitalism is the opioid epidemic. The crisis of capitalism is the fact that big pharmaceutical companies are pushing doctors to overprescribe opioid medications, getting people addicted, turning people who went to the hospital for an Indian to lifetime drug addicts. And that is a crisis. To every individual who's been caught up in that, to every family that's been devastated by that, that is absolutely a crisis. But that is not a crisis of capitalism in the sense that we're describing it. Some people say that war and war profiteering, and the fact that we have corporations that benefit from war and see militarism as in their economic interest, this is a crisis of capitalism. And in a sense, they're right, because the underlying crisis is forcing the capitalists into a confrontation with the new alternative emerging economy centered around Russia and China. But you'll recall that even in good times, even in the roaring 90s, even back in the 50s and 60s when the USA had a strong economy amid the post-World War II economic expansion, even then, there was still plenty of war profiteering and militarism. That, in and of itself, is not the crisis of capitalism. War profiteering, political repression, the turning of human beings into financial calculations, unemployment, low wages, poverty, addiction, cynicism, pessimism, and hopelessness. These are all things that go on in a profit-centered economy, even in good times. These are things that even when the economy is expanding and profits on Wall Street are high, and the country is not in an economic crisis, these are all things that go on. These are built-in aspects of capitalism. But what we're talking about now is a crisis of capitalism. And we're talking about that in the Marxist sense. A crisis of capitalism. And in chapter 1 of this book, I describe what a crisis of capitalism is. Capitalism is a system of production organized for profit. Under capitalism, this pen isn't created so guys like me can have something to write with. In capitalism, this pen is created in order to sell it so that the capitalist can make money off of it. In capitalism, food isn't produced so that people can eat it. Food is produced so that a capitalist can make money off of it. Under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. That is how Friedrich Engels put it. The means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. Meaning, economic activity, production, commerce are guided by the invisible hand of the market. They're not functioning in the interest of human needs, but rather in order to maximize the wealth of those who own them. That is capitalism. Capitalism is a society where money comes first. Profits are in command, as Mao Zedong put it. Profits in command. That is the nature of the capitalist system. And capitalism introduced to humanity a crisis that in all other societies would have seemed insane and absurd. You go back to the Roman Empire, you go back to the age of feudalism, you go back to Greece, ancient Egypt, when the ability of humanity to produce enough to feed itself was precarious, where you had crop failures and famines and people dying of malnutrition was just part of everyday life in the ancient world. If you had explained to the ancient human beings that our ability to produce food would greatly advance, we would have tractors for our farms, we'd have food processing centers, big machines, our ability to feed people would expand to amazing heights. But we would still have malnutrition, and we would still have hunger. In fact, we would have crises of malnutrition that would break out, and people would be hungry because too much food had been created. They would have said, that is insane. You went back to the ancient world where housing was a luxury, where most of humanity lived in shacks and caves. It was very hard for human beings to just get together basic shelter. And you explained that one day we would advance technology to the point that building houses would be very easy. In fact, there would be an abundance of houses. There would be empty houses everywhere. And people would then become homeless because there are too many houses. People would look at you and say, you're insane. This is insanity. How can people be homeless because there are too many houses? How can people be hungry because there is too much food? How can poverty be created by abundance? That is the nature of capitalism. Capitalism, production organized for profit, has a built-in mechanism of self-destruction. Capitalism creates a situation where people are homeless because there are too many houses, where people are hungry because there is too much food, where abundance creates poverty. And that is unique to the capitalist system. Only under capitalism do you have the problem of overproduction. That the worker is hired to produce products, and the wages paid out to the worker in the process of producing the product are never enough to buy back what he produces. The worker is only ever paid a fraction of what the ultimate cost of the product he produces is. In order to make this pen, for every pen that's created, a worker is paid so much in wages. But the wages paid out in the process of creating this pen are never enough for the worker to go back and buy the pen. The amount of wages paid out in the process of production are significantly lower than the consuming power of the worker. The worker cannot buy back what he produces. There is always more product churned out in production than there are wages paid out to the workers to consume it. And this is always the reality in the capitalist system. But the capitalist makes this problem worse, because he is constantly trying to replace human labor with machines. He wants to minimize the role of the worker in production. He wants to make the workers he does have to hire more easily replaceable by de-skilling the jobs in order to maximize his profits. The capitalist is constantly minimizing the role of the worker. The less labor costs the capitalist has to pay out to create this pen, the more profit he can make on this pen in the short term. However, only human labor creates value. And as you reduce the role of the worker in production, as human labor decreases, the amount of profit the capitalist can make is also reduced. And this is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. The capitalist is already producing more products than he's paying workers to purchase. But he makes this problem worse by trying to maximize his profits by advancing technology. And Marx wrote about this in the age of steam engines, in the age of Thomas Edison inventing the light bulb. If Marx were alive today, we would turn to Karl Marx and we would say, "You ain't seen nothing yet, buddy. You had no idea how right you were." Artificial intelligence would knock Karl Marx's socks off. Artificial intelligence would blow Karl Marx's mind. If you told Karl Marx, we got machines that can paint pictures, we got machines that can trade stocks, we got machines that can play chess better than human beings can, Karl Marx would have said, "You're out of your mind. This is what I was writing about. I was writing about the problem of workers being replaced by machines and human labor being eliminated from production, and this exacerbating the problem of overproduction." But what you're showing me now, the computer revolution, this is taking what I wrote about the reason that capitalism breaks down every 10 years or so into a financial crisis. The market becomes glutted with products that cannot be sold. What I wrote about, this problem of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profit, what I wrote about, what I spent my life at the British Museum trying to prove, the built-in economic problem. What Karl Marx spent his life writing about and proving with economic data has been taken beyond anything that Karl Marx could have imagined. It is the computer revolution that is ultimately the final nail in the global capitalist system. Capitalism couldn't handle steam engines. Capitalism couldn't handle light bulbs and radios. In 1929, the stock market crashed because of Henry Ford and his great advances in assembly line production, Taylorism. The roaring 20s came to an end because production in the factories in the 1920s had become so efficient that they churned out so many products they couldn't sell, and you had a Great Depression. And that Great Depression led to a prolonged capitalist crisis. Didn't go away in a year, didn't go away in 2 years, didn't go away in 3 years. And the only way that long-term capitalist crisis of the 1930s was resolved was with a catastrophe of astronomical proportions called the Second World War. The Holocaust. Every major city in the Western world outside of the United States being destroyed by bombs. 27 million people in the Soviet Union losing their lives. Millions of people in China killed by Japan. Millions of Japanese people killed by the fire bombing of Tokyo and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And all of this destruction on a mass scale. 1939 to 1945 were years of mass death and destruction in which the entire Western capitalist world was consuming itself. Fascism, war, death, gas chambers, atomic weapons ultimately carried out so much destruction and death and depopulation that ultimately, out of that, the capitalist system was able to piece itself together. And all of that was simply spawned by the great technological advances of the 1920s. They used to say in the United States, Ford has overtaken Marx. Ford has overtaken Marx, they used to say. Oh, Marx said that capitalism had this built-in problem of self-destruction. That's silly. That couldn't be the case. Look, Henry Ford has invented this modern capitalism with his Model T Ford and his efficient production. We've got Taylorism. Look at our American capitalism. It's speeding ahead. Ford has proved that Marx was just downright wrong. Look what we've built. He's built a model city in Dearborn, Michigan. It's just so beautiful. Ford has defeated Marx. And then we got the Great Depression in the 1930s. And it was during the Second World War that Alan Turing, the British mathematician, was hired, kind of forced by the British government to develop the great decoding machine that laid the basis for much of the computer revolution. After the Second World War, you saw IBM and its punch card machine. One thing led to another. And in 1970, Zbigniew Brzezinski, out of the Center for Communist Studies at Columbia University, a lifelong anti-communist strategist, the institution that created Barack Obama, Zbigniew Brzezinski, a real-life Dr. Strangelove, a real-life Dr. Evil, if there ever was such a thing. Zbigniew Brzezinski churned out a book called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. And he said that information technology is the future. And the way the United States can defeat the Soviet Union is by positioning itself at the center of the computer revolution. And Brzezinski strategically oriented the American intelligence community, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, to start funding and setting up loans and making arrangements to put the United States at the center of the computer revolution. I don't know if you recall that Al Gore, when he was running for president in the year 2000, now Tipper and I'm from Tennessee. I'm Al Gore. I was vice president to Bill Clinton. Now, my wife Tipper and we like to walk in nature. My family's money comes from the tobacco industry. I'm Al Gore. And Al Gore, you'll remember, during the campaign, he misspoke and he said, I invented the internet. Or I believe what he actually said is, we invented the internet. What was he referring to? He was referring to the fact that it was government policy done at the behest and in response to Brzezinski's strategic thinking with the Trilateral Commission that enabled the United States to put itself strategically at the center of the computer revolution. The USA wanted to be at the center of information technology because they knew that the Soviet Union, that was under attack, that was constantly being forced to invent new types of nuclear weapons to keep up in the arms catch-up. It wasn't an arms race. The USA would threaten the Soviet Union, then they'd have to develop deterrent, and then they'd threaten them, and they, it was an arms catch-up, as Michael Parenti talks about. But we know that it was a strategic decision by the government of the United States to take advantage of the fact that the Soviet Union didn't have anywhere near the wealth and resources the United States had. They were a country rising up from poverty. They'd invented space travel. They'd industrialized rapidly. They'd wiped out illiteracy. They'd built a modern industrial country in a generation. They'd sped ahead, then they defeated the Nazi invaders, then they'd launched Sputnik and Yuri Gagarin into orbit. They did amazing things in the Soviet Union. And they were doing computer research as well. They absolutely were. In 1985, they developed their own home computer system with no Western technology. They were able to do amazing things, but they just didn't have the resources that the United States had to position itself at the center of the information revolution. And so the capitalist government poured all of its money and resources into creating Silicon Valley, Stanford University, and Stanford Research Institute. A very big, very, very, very big part of the computer revolution. And who was heavily involved in some of the projects at Stanford Research Institute? Who was involved in their bizarre research into mind control and psychics and telekinesis and all this weird occult stuff they were doing at Stanford Research Institute? Well, it was none other than Marilyn Ferguson, who was Al Gore's personal spiritual advisor. Marilyn Ferguson was the occultist guru who sat at the center of the Stanford Research Institute and was advising Al Gore up into his vice presidency, was greeted at the Bill Clinton White House. Marilyn Ferguson, the CIA's favorite occult mystic pagan guru. She composed a book called The Aquarian Conspiracy. Arguing that humanity was headed toward a gigantic explosion that would put the world back into balance. It wasn't communist, it wasn't anti-communist. It was about consciousness raising and awakening. And she said, America is free, but California is freer. And the center of it would be Stanford University, Stanford Research Institute, and the computer revolution, the Apple guys, those guys tinkering around in their garages, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and they were going to be at the center of this revolution. This book I talk about, where do computers come from? I talk about this. And in their effort to defeat communism, by utilizing military research and government power, Tipper and I, we invented the internet. We invented the internet. Yes, we did. We invented the internet. They advanced the means of production, technology, and they invented the internet. And then they invented social media. And then they invented artificial intelligence. And now they're doing things no one would have ever dreamed of doing. Andrew Yang warned us that self-driving cars are not that far away. But self-driving cars, just that one artificial intelligence, technological advancement, self-driving cars, all by itself, nothing else. Forget about all the other AI, just self-driving cars, would lead to mass riots in the streets, 20 million truck drivers out of work, hungry people, starving, rioting, instability. That's self-driving cars, that one innovation that it is on the brink of coming about due to capitalism's great advances in technology. That one innovation would destroy America. And it's not the only one. Artificial intelligence is coming down the pike. And in a rational society, it would be a great thing. And so would self-driving cars. So would all of this. This would all be amazing because it would mean that human beings would have less work to do. But it's only because of the irrational capitalist system, profit-centered production, that is only because we have a system where money comes first. It's only because of that. It is only because of the system of production organized for profit. Because the means of production are operated according to the irrational needs of private owners. It is only because of this insanity that we call the market that artificial intelligence isn't a miracle. We're not against technology. We are not Luddites. We are not Amish. We're not primitivists. We're not Ted Kaczynski. We're not Unabombers. No. We believe in humanity. We believe in historical progress, but we know that there's a roadblock holding back human progress and holding back technological development, holding back the miracles that human beings can create with our intelligence. And that roadblock is profits in command. It is the irrational capitalist system. And China doesn't have this problem. China's making amazing breakthroughs in fusion energy. They're doing great computer research there. And in China, the means of production are controlled by the Communist Party. Production and the economy is centrally planned. They have 5-year economic plans. They've got state-run industries. And they've got a big private sector too, but even it doesn't function according to the market. Huawei Technology is technically a private company, but very closely controlled by the Chinese government, set up by the Chinese government to serve the interests of socialism with Chinese characteristics. China's got the biggest steel manufacturing apparatus in the world, makes half the steel in the world. China's got the largest hydroelectric power plant in the world. China, they spend and they let people out of poverty. And they don't have this problem of poverty amid abundance. Now, they have problems in China. They got plenty of problems. But the problem of people getting poorer because of technology, the problem of people being impoverished because there is too much stuff, poverty created by abundance, poverty amid plenty, that problem isn't a problem for them because profits are not in command. They have a government of action. They have a government that came to power as the result of a popular revolution that rules via 90 million members of a well-organized, highly disciplined organization called the Chinese Communist Party. And it controls the means of production in order to allow growth to no longer be restrained. And it comes out with 5-year economic plans. This year, we want to lift this many people out of poverty. This year, we want to build this much hydro production. This year, we want to advance sewage, and we want to advance the power plants and the power facilities. We want to do this much construction and railway. And they come out with a plan, and the private sector follows along behind that plan, carries out its market activities in coordination with the plan, and they move ahead. With central planning, they've overcome the irrationality of capitalism. And this, what I am preaching to you today, this is the Marxism that you will read in Socialism, Utopian and Scientific by Frederick Engels. This is the Marxism that you will read in the Communist Manifesto. This is the Marxism that you will read in William Z. Foster and his writings. This is the Marxism you'll read in Eugene Debs and Gus Hall. The problem of overproduction, the problem of poverty created by abundance. There's even an old Union song called Solidarity Forever. And there's many verses to Solidarity Forever, but one of the later verses goes like this. It is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. And the next line is the most important. Yet we stand outcast and starving, mid the wonders we have made. But the union makes us strong. What are they talking about? We stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made. What are they talking about? Well, they're talking about the built-in problem of capitalism. The more you build, the more wealth you produce, the poorer everyone gets. And I saw this with my own eyes in Detroit. 2008, summer of Detroit. I was a college student, 19 years old, and I walked through neighborhoods full of empty, foreclosed homes. I saw the U.S. economy crash. And I saw how outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, families that lost their homes set up tents. Started living in tents. And I've been to LA, and I've seen Skid Row. Thousands and thousands of people living in tents, crammed conditions, because there are too many houses. Because the housing bubble burst. Because Americans couldn't afford to keep buying houses at the same rate they had once bought them. Because the crooked mortgage lending schemes that Alan Greenspan had legalized to keep people spending money came to a close. Now we live in a country where there are homeless encampments. Americans are hungry and starving. Starving because there's too much food. Hungry because there are too many houses. Homeless because too much housing has been produced. This is the irrational capitalist system. And the built-in problems of this highly irrational system have been exacerbated by artificial intelligence. And Marx saw this coming well over 100 years ago. Karl Marx saw this coming. He wrote about how the capitalists are going to make the means of production more and more efficient, more and more efficient. They're going to hire more and more people. But they're going to produce so much stuff that pretty soon fewer and fewer people are going to need to be hired. It's going to get to be so bad that the poor people are going to have to band together and form combinations and eventually prepare for the coming fight ahead. They'll form combinations and band together and prepare for the coming fight ahead, and communication technology will be useful, and the capitalists will fight among themselves, Karl Marx taught us. The capitalists will fight among themselves, and they'll turn to the working class to be their foot soldiers in the fight. And in doing so, they will politicize the working class and furnish it with the very weapons to overthrow the bourgeoisie. And while at first the workers will enter the struggle as foot soldiers of the capitalists, soon the capitalists will be coming over to their side as the working class takes its rightful place as the master of human history and seizes control of the means of production. And the banks and the factories and the industries are organized to serve the needs of the people. And we have a rationally planned economy. This is Marxism. What I am preaching to you now is Marxism. And a little fairy tale about pencil factories where people share the profits is not Marxism. And Luna Oid dancing with puppets is not Marxism. And Vosh farting into his pants while he begs the US government to send more weapons to Ukraine to kill people is not Marxism. Marxism is the struggle of society to control the means of production. That's Marxism. It is the proletarian movement, the wealth-producing class, those who create the value of this world with their sweat and toil. It is them asserting control over all the wealth and beauty that they have created and organizing the economy to work in the interests of all humanity. That is Marxism. And it was Marxism that made the Soviet Union go from being one of the poorest countries in the world to being an industrial superpower. And it was socialism in a centrally planned economy that made China the second largest economy in the world. It's because of socialism that Cuba has one of the highest life expectancies in Latin America. It's because of socialism that Nicaragua has a far stronger economy than Honduras or Guatemala or any of the US-aligned governments in that part of the world. It's because of socialism under the leadership of the great African revolutionary Muammar Gaddafi that Libya had the highest life expectancy on the African continent and built the great man-made river, the world's largest irrigation project. It's because of socialism that Bolivia, with central planning, had the highest rates of GDP growth for many years. Because of socialism that illiteracy has been wiped out in Venezuela. And whole neighborhoods have sprung up. The people of Venezuela have lifted up their heads. Because of socialism that Vietnam, with its socialist-oriented market economy, where the state plans out production, Vietnam has experienced what even the World Economic Forum calls a miracle, an economic miracle. There's absolutely no question of socialism's superiority to capitalism. There's no question about it. The superiority of socialism over capitalism was proved at first by Stalin in the Soviet Union. It was proved once again by the achievements of the Chinese Revolution. It was proved by Gaddafi in Libya. It was proved by Fidel Castro in Cuba. It was proved by the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. It was proved by the Vietnamese. It was proved over and over and over and over again. The evidence is there. The only reason that Egypt has electricity is because Abdel Nasser and Nikita Khrushchev teamed up to build the Great Aswan Dam. The only reason that there is a huge elevated road connecting Pakistan to China is because Mao Zedong teamed up with the Pakistani government to build the Great China-Pakistan Friendship Highway, which now lays the basis for the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And it was socialism that invented space travel. It was socialism that patented the first mobile phone. It was socialism that invented LED lights. It was socialism that invented the AK-47 rifle. There's no question about the superiority of centrally planned production in heavy industry, in banking, in energy, over private production. There's no question about this. Now, if you want to argue about consumer goods, if you want to argue about hospitality, you want to argue about innovation in the tech sector, you might have a point. And that's why in 21st century socialism, we've learned that the Soviet model isn't coming back. We've learned that you need cooperatives, you need private businesses, you need these things to accompany the overall state central plan. 21st century socialism has learned from the weaknesses of Soviet production style. 20th century socialism had great achievements. It helped many countries get over that first hurdle of industrialization. However, it started to stagnate when it came to consumer goods, technological innovations. Started to stagnate in some areas, hospitality, tourism, and so there's been an adjustment. Cuba has adjusted their socialist economy. Vietnam and China have adjusted their socialist economy. North Korea is working on adjusting its socialist economy. 21st century socialism has learned to correct the problems that socialist societies encounter after they overcome that first hurdle of industrialization. And 21st century socialism has proved itself to be even more efficient. And China is marching ahead, and Vietnam is marching ahead. Cuba is marching ahead. Nicaragua is marching ahead. 21st century socialism, an adjustment of the socialism we saw in the 20th century, is marching ahead. And so what we're seeing now in the United States is the capitalists fighting with each other and trying to impose some kind of degrowth fascism in order to save their system. The ultra-rich are trying to impose a Malthusian degrowth scheme to reduce the population, to drive down consumption, to try and correct the built-in economic problems of their capitalist system. In order to resolve the crisis of overproduction, they are trying to carry out mass destruction, mass reduction of consumption, mass depopulation. They say it's to save the environment. It is not to save the environment. It is to save their system. And this is fascist economics. And there's a fight within the ruling class now regarding the implementation of fascist economics to try and save the capitalist system. And this fight within the ruling class creates an opportunity for those of us who take it seriously to intervene and move toward the construction of a united front, an anti-monopoly coalition of people who still believe in growth, of people who think Russia and China and Venezuela and Iran and Cuba are not our enemy, of people who want to see a prosperous future and a better tomorrow, people who don't want to be degrown and socially engineered to death, of people who want to assert their humanity against the dehumanizing commodification by those who view us as no better than animals. There is potential now for an anti-monopoly coalition to emerge. However, those of us who take this seriously must intervene. And no, we're not intervening by making YouTube videos. No, we're not intervening by tweeting. No, we're not intervening by getting online, yelling at each other on the internet, calling people Nazis and fascists, and calling people transphobe and homophobe and racist and sexist. And no, we're going to intervene by forming combinations, communities of solidarity, a block of people who are committed to functioning in a disciplined manner, who are committed to building a group of people who will enter strategic alliances with forces in the ruling class, who will build solidarity with countries that are under attack by the imperialists, that will bring people in and educate them about the horrors of the capitalist system and the need for a new society, about the science of Marxism, the history of revolution. We'll build that community, that solidarity, that block. And that block will be solid. When the storm comes, when the ground shakes, when the bottom falls out, we'll have a network. We'll have a ship. We'll have a block. And we will drastically change our tactics when the time is right. We will intervene and change the course of history. But if we don't have an organization, we have nothing. Twitter doesn't matter. Facebook doesn't matter. YouTube doesn't matter. Instagram does not matter. All that matters is how much of a ship we built before the storm. Because when the floodwaters start rising, all it's going to matter is if you've got a place to be safe and dry. That's all it's going to matter. We know that the rich and the poor alike will be running for the rocks and the mountains. But we'll have dry land. We'll have a block. And we'll have allies and friends. We'll have the beginning of the anti-monopoly coalition that will lead to an anti-monopoly government. And that's what matters. Nothing else matters. Everything you see today, everything you see, everything that worries you, the gossip, the petty spats, your family members, your coworkers, none of that matters. It's all superficial. Because time is coming when the ground is going to shake. There's a storm on the horizon. There's a bad moon rising. And I'll just end my opening remarks. We're about to hit the hour mark. I'm going to end my opening remarks tonight by telling you there's a lot of dead people walking around. There's no other way to put it. There's a lot of people who are technically alive. They're not dead, but they are only living biologically. Their heart is beating. Their lungs are breathing. Their eyes are moving. Their nose is smelling. Their ears are hearing. But they are dead. They are dead because they have given up their human agency. They've given up or never become aware of the notion that they can change history. They've given up or never acknowledged that they could actually have an impact on the world. They've not taken up history's challenge. And they walk, they go here, they go there, they go here, they go there. Facebook tells them one thing, YouTube tells them another thing, TV tells them another thing, and they just go through life as a zombie. They are only living biologically. They are dead, but alive. They are zombies. And most of them don't know any better. And we have to love them. And when we go out, people say we're brainwashing people. We're doing the opposite. We're trying to snap them out of their trance. We're clapping. We're saying, wake up, wake up. We're saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. That's what we're doing. These people are hypnotized. These people are in a trance. They don't know what's happening. Yes, I'll take the vaccine. Yes, I'll hate Russia. Yes, we need to jail Donald Trump. Yes, I need to eat bugs. Yes, I need to own nothing. Yes, I need to be poor. Yes, I need to be poor. They're in a trance. And we have to love them. We can't blame them. We have to love them. We have to love them. And some of them will be able to wake up, and some of them we won't. However, there are some people who see the truth and are aware of everything I just said on these streams, but are weak. They're weak because this ain't easy. This ain't easy. Being in an organization with people is not an easy endeavor. People hurt each other's feelings. And I don't belittle that. you know, I mean, I could say that, like, oh, did you get your feelings hurt? But I don't want to say it that way. Someone disrespects you, especially if you're somebody who doesn't fit in with the society that we're living in. Someone disrespects you, makes you feel like you don't belong, like you're less than, in the place where you feel like you belong. It's painful. It hurts. And sometimes things don't go as you want. Sometimes people let you down. Sometimes things are not as successful as you would hope. Sometimes you hit a roadblock. You hit a speed bump. Sometimes things get rough. And for some people, it's not an intellectual question. It's not an intellectual question at all. They understand it. They know Russia's not our enemy. They know China's not our enemy. They know capitalism is breaking down on a massive scale. They know all of this. But they're just too psychologically weak. They don't have the ability to endure, to push themselves through the hard times, to be part of a community, to be part of an organization, even when it's not easy. They don't have the strength. When they don't have that strength, it fills them with shame. It fills them with absolute shame. So they do everything they can to try and pull other people down. There's somebody who has not done any political activism in at least a year. They have done nothing. But I caught them today. I caught them stalking people who are becoming part of our organization and confronting them and saying, oh, didn't you know Caleb's desperately trying to pull other people back into living biologically. You have to wonder, this is a person who knows the truth about Venezuela, the truth about Cuba. He knows the truth about US wars, but he's not doing anything about that. Nothing. He's sitting at home, goes to work every day. The only activism this person engages in is stalking people, following very closely the Center for Political Innovation, and running to people in the group and trying to get them to do what he did and surrender. You got to think, why would somebody who knows the truth do this? Well, maybe you don't like me, you don't like the organization that we built here, you know, that's fine. Maybe you don't feel you can do it, but why is it that the only activism that somebody who knows the truth about imperialism is able to engage in is actively trying to tear apart an anti-imperialist group? Now, I don't think this person is doing it because they're stupid. I don't even think it's necessarily just this person's weaknesses, spite, and trauma that's causing them to do this. I'll be honest with you. This is Satan. This is Satan. I gave a talk where I talked about 4 forms of Satanism. I listed 4 different manifestations of what one could refer to in the spiritual sense as Satanism. And the final form, the 4th form of Satanism that I listed, was the Satanism within us. The evil in our soul that demoralizes us. It prevents us from going out and achieving things. That evil voice so many people have in the back of their mind that says, don't do it. You're only going to fail. Everyone's going to laugh at you. You'll never accomplish anything. You're stupid. That evil voice that so many people have in the back of their minds, that is Satan. It's not you. It's not your own mind. You want to build. You want to construct. You want to create. You want to achieve something. You want to have a family. You want to have children. You want to do something exciting. You want to dream big and go hard. That's you. That's your original mind. There's that dark voice. Sometimes it's echoing the voice of an abusive parent. Sometimes it's echoing the voice of a cruel or a harsh teacher you had. Sometimes it's echoing the voice of a bully or someone you dealt with. But when it really gets down to it, that evil voice inside of you that says you can't do anything, that destroys your confidence and your ability, that holds you back, that voice is Satan. That is the devil. That is the manifestation of evil in the universe. That's what that is. And if you want that voice to go away, if you want to suppress that, if you want to unleash the heroic, creative part of yourself, you can't do it alone. And what that voice wants so bad is to isolate you, to cut you off from your comrades, to cut you off from your friends, to cut you off from your family, to make you all alone at home with nothing but your phone and your Facebook social media, so that you can just get into a negative cycle of hopelessness and destruction. That is what that voice wants from you. But one of the greatest benefits being in a revolutionary organization is together we can join arm in arm as brothers, and we can silence Satan. We can silence that voice, that destructive hopelessness. We can silence it. We can push each other to do better. We can push each other to go harder. We can push each other to achieve. That is what we can do. We can bring out the best in one another. We can march forward. And you can't do it on YouTube, and you can't do it on Facebook, and you can't do it on Twitter and Instagram. You can only do it with comrades. And that alone should be enough of a reason to get involved in a revolutionary organization. Because when I see what Satan has done to people who've submitted to Satan's will, people who have let the evil consume them, people who know the truth but have deteriorated into wreckers, when I see what it has done to them, I thank God that that's not me. And I realize that if I were to stop doing what I do, if I were to stop trying to build an organization, if I were to stop having comrades, that is where I would be. And I thank God every day that I am not in that world. I thank God every day that I have comrades, that I have an organization. And I think about all the hurt that I've endured, which it has been. It hasn't been smooth sailing. I've been in organizations and fought with people. I've the whole synthetic left has disowned me. But I keep going. And people continue to say to me, Caleb, why are you always organizing? I'm organizing because this is all that I know. I will never live biologically. I am spiritually alive, and I will never give that up. I will never become a zombie. I will never become a wrecker. And I want the same for you. I want the same for you. So those are my opening remarks for tonight. I hope you found them amusing. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We got a few super chats that went by. David Fox said he really appreciated today's message. Thank you, David. David says, I'm going through a rough patch myself, and I really appreciate your wisdom. Thank you, comrade, and keep up the great work. Well, thank you, David. David is a beloved member of our community, a union man, a hardworking comrade out in Australia. So thank you, David, and I'm glad I made a difference in your day today. I hope that I gave you some inspiration. And then there was one other super chat that went by. Is it possible to create socialism in one sitting? Create socialism in one sitting. So I'm writing that down. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's do names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. And we'll go from there. So we got John Whitty in Houston, Jonathan in Stockholm, Sweden. YouTube just made me sit through a Joe Biden ad to watch your. Well, there you go. Damn YouTube. Rice in Adelaide, Australia. Klaus Kinski in Germany. Comrade Robert in Hawaii. Io Hillary in New York. Shout out to you. Patrick in Maine. Sarah in Toronto. St. David's, Bermuda. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. We love you, David. Temple City, California. Panos in Greece. Jenny in Cincinnati. Chester in England. Tyler in Salem, Missouri. Edward in Kentucky, AJ from NJ, Raj from Texas, Kirby in Chattanooga, Anthony in Detroit, Sherry Spector in South Jersey, Isaac in Vancouver, Canada, Detroit, Chris in Salt Lake City. Welcome, Chris. Glad you're here. Glad you're here, Chris. So glad to have you here. Brandon was in the next town. There you go. There you go. Gabby in Chicago loved my opening remarks. We love you, Gabby. We're so glad you're a member of the Center for Political Innovation. You're a beloved comrade. Micah in Las Vegas. Kendall in San Diego has returned. Isaac in Vancouver, Canada. Micah in Las Vegas. Kendall in San Diego. There we go. There we go. Shorty Psyop is in Oakland. Ishmael is in Los Angeles. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, 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 everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Do us a favor, hit the like button, make sure that you're subscribed. The algorithms are doing weird things with my subscriptions, and it is totally rigged. I was talking with Peter Coffin. The shadow banning that our communities go through is unbelievable. The manipulation of the algorithms. How is it that me confronting Sa Ing-wen had millions of views all over China, was on TV multiple times a day in China, me confronting Sa Ing-wen, but nobody saw it, only like 300 shares on Twitter and very, very little YouTube play, because it's rigged, folks. Social media is rigged, and that's why we just have to remember that it's not fucking real. Social media is not real. It's rigged, it's fake, it's phony. but real life stuff is happening. And I have 2 announcements about in real life stuff that is happening. Let me just put the first one on the screen. It's coming up, but you might be able to slip in. You might be able to slip into this first one, right? It's literally days away, this first one, but I'm putting it on the screen. Last minute, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we are having a national gathering in Missouri. We are having a 3-day weekend workshop for members of the Center for Political Innovation, as well as trusted close friends. And we still have some spots at the workshop. Now, there's a good number of people coming, allies from different organizations, as well as CPI members and just friends. There's people that are friends, that are allies, they're coming as well. But if you want to come, it's not too late. We had somebody join 2 days ago because they're in Missouri, they're in the area, they want to be part of it. And, they're a friend of another organization that we've worked with. So they're coming. We opened up the door and they're going to be there. In addition, there's other people signing up last minute. So, you can be part of it. It's not too late. It is not too late. If you want to be part of it, all you have to do is join the Center for Political Innovation and you can get a last minute invitation. Now, security is pretty tight. We're obviously not announcing publicly where the event's going to be, and it's all very carefully regulated. We've taken a lot of precautions to protect ourselves, which is necessary, right? There are people that are out to get us, and that is not an exaggeration, as I talked about in my opening remarks. But anyhow, if you want to be part of our great 3-day weekend workshop, it is not too late. It is not too late. So go to the website, join the Center for Political Innovation, link down below, or cpiusa.org, hit join. You can become a member and make clear you want to be coming to the workshop, and we will try to get you to the workshop. We'll do our best to get you there. So hope that you can make it. Hope that I see you in Missouri near St. Louis this coming weekend. If I don't see you, I'll catch you next time. And that's the other announcement I got to make. Mark your calendar for July 10th. Mark your calendar for July 10th. I made the reservation today on the space. It is a beautiful, amazing space. I'm Donald Trump. No, it's a really lovely space in Manhattan, Midtown. Just a beautiful facility. Peter Coffin's coming to town. He's making a documentary about it. We got some great speakers, lawyers are going to be there. It looks like Jose is going to be there, by the way. I don't know if you guys know Jose of the great intervention, disruptor, AOC, shouter, downer. Jose is going to be there. Jose will be there, it appears. Jose will be in the house. That's going to be big if you're a fan of Jose. Jose Vargas, who has done the disruptions, he will be speaking, it appears. We will also have some other great guests that we're waiting. We're holding off on the announcement. But it'll be a CPI event. Peter Coffin's making a documentary about it. It's going to be the whole 9 yards. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be tremendous. So New York City, July 10th, Monday, July 10th. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. So mark your calendar. When we're ready to formally announce it, we will. We are holding off on that at the moment. We're getting, there's a couple moving parts, right? With all these events, there's moving parts. There's many moving parts. It's going this way. It's going that way. We just got to get everything in order. And now we got the space reserved. We got our space. Thank God. We got our space for the event. We got Jose is speaking. We got a couple other speakers, and we got one thing, we got another thing, and it's looking good. So hold your horses, but mark your calendars. If you're a New York City area Center for Political Innovation ally, friend, you want to meet me in person, you want to meet Peter Coffin and Jose in person, mark your calendar because it's going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome. I mean, look, we always do that flag ceremony when we start things out. Well, we have decided to take the flag ceremony to a whole nother level. We're doing something completely different for the flag ceremony, right? We always open, with the national anthem, the Internationale, the Pledge of Unity, but Oh, you got no idea what we've got in store this time. We're going to knock your socks off, as they say. I keep saying that about knock your socks off. I don't know why. That's the phrase. It's like something people said in 1950 or something. Oh, gee golly, I'm going to knock your socks off. See you later, alligator. Yeah, trying not to be hokey. Yeah, it's going to be, we're doing something really special. This is going to be awesome. I am so excited. We haven't had a New York City event. You know, we had our rally, our outdoor rally, but this will be the first indoor New York City forum we've done in a long time. We've done stuff in Chicago. We've done stuff in Austin, Texas. We've done stuff in Kansas. And yeah, this is going to be, we did something in DC, great documentary about it that Peter Coffin made. And now we're taking it to another level. We are taking it to another level. We're doing something in Midtown Manhattan. We're having an indoor forum. Oh my goodness. You know, it's going to be something special. On the surface, it might not exactly look, you know, you might not exactly think it's going to be what it appears. You know, it'll be interesting. When we announce it, I think you're all going to go, huh, right? When we actually announce the theme of the event, you're going to hear some, huh. There's going to be, you know, you're going to be like, wait, that doesn't sound like the kind of thing CPI does, but it is. It is something that the CPI does, right? I can't say too much about it now. I just can't, you know, I mean, I can't, you know, I can't let the cat out of the bag. Can't blow the whistle, or what do they call that? You know, I don't know. I can't tell you too much about it. But I can tell you that July 10th is the date. It'll be in Midtown Manhattan. Can't tell you the venue yet, but you know, we're going to be ready to announce soon. You know, it's going to happen. It's going to be great. Looks like Jose is going to be there. He told me he could be there. A couple other speakers are confirmed. We're lining up, you know, again, a lot of moving parts, going one way, going another way, you know, but we're getting all the moving parts nailed down, and we are going to do something awesome. So that is coming up July 10th, New York City. Be there. It is going to be something special. That's all I can say. It will be something very, very, very special. So you don't want to miss it if you're in the New York City area. You know, and then hopefully it looks like September we're doing something in Portland, but that's still on hold, right? The next big thing we're doing, July 10th, New York City. Mark your calendar. If you're a CPI friend or fellow traveler, if you're in the New York City area, mark your calendar for July 10th. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome. It's going to be great. So there you go, folks. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and now I will start answering super chats. First question comes from Gleb. If anyone has any more super chat questions, feel free to shoot them our way. We're always happy to, always very, very, very happy to, you know, always very, 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 very happy to have people engage us. You know, so if you have a question, shoot us a super chat. We'll happily answer it. First question comes from Mr. Gleb. Mr. Gleb, it could be Mrs. Gleb. I don't know. Gleb could be male or female. Gleb has never identified their gender, you know, but I assume Gleb is a male person, but I've never met Mr. Gleb or Mrs. Gleb or Ms. Gleb or whatever. But Gleb asks, how would a people's government deal with dissent? Gleb, my goal is to create a society that is so secure and so free and so open that no suppression of dissent would ever be necessary. I want to create a society where the free development of every individual is the free development of all. I want to create a society that goes far beyond that, Gleb. I want to create a society in which there is no need for a government. I want to create a society in which there is no need for police, no social hierarchies, no bosses, where people can just do what they want and take what they need from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. And the basis of that is vast material abundance. However, we're not there yet. Right? We're just not there yet. Right now, we have a society in which there is social hierarchy. we're in a society in which there is suppression of dissent. We're in a society in which there is a push and pull struggle between imperialism and anti-imperialism, between the working class and the capitalist class, which the state exists to protect the property of the capitalists, in which the workers are suppressed by that state apparatus, which wars are waged to maintain the dominance of Wall Street around the world. And there is heavy suppression of dissent in our society. The Uhuru movement are facing 10 years in prison simply for the alleged crime of spreading Russian propaganda. It's unbelievable. They want to put the Uhuru movement, Chairman O'Malley, Jesse Neville, Penny Hess, they want to put them in prison simply for opposing the arming of Ukraine, for running election campaigns against the Democrats in Florida. It's unbelievable what they are doing right now. We know what they're doing to Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump, maybe he was a shitty president. They're trying to throw him in jail to keep him from being president again. He would win the election. And Joe Biden and the FBI and the CIA and the deep state and the Department of Justice are trying to lock Donald Trump in jail to keep him from winning the election. There are all kinds of people. I was just in Miami, Florida. I spoke to a woman who had her home raided by the FBI with guns drawn. And she didn't even enter the Capitol. She was on Capitol grounds on January 6th. They stormed her home and pointed guns in her face. Look at the January 6th cases. There are people who the evidence against them was tweets. The evidence against them was that they were friends with somebody. The evidence against them was text messages they sent to somebody joking about, armed revolution or something like that. Right? I mean, there's heavy political repression going on in this country right now. So don't tell me that America is this bastion of freedom and dissent. And, look at how they dragged Maria Butina. What did Maria Butina ever do? Woman, Russian heritage. She had a boyfriend in the NRA. It's not a fucking crime. They dragged her and they held her in a federal prison for months until she finally agreed to plead to being an unregistered foreign lobbyist. And then they shipped her back to Russia where she hadn't lived for years. Unbelievable what they did to Maria Butina. Look what they did to Victor Bout. Victor Bout, an arms trader. And they extradited him from Thailand and they held him in prison for years. They made a Hollywood movie to demonize him, calling him the Merchant of Death. I interviewed him from prison. So don't tell me that America is a bastion of freedom. Look what they did to the Black Panthers, how Fred Hampton was gunned down. Now they love the Black Panthers, but back then they canceled the Black Panthers. After they murdered Fred Hampton, the front page of the Chicago Tribune was vicious Panther attack. So don't give me this about America being a bastion of free speech. You ask me, how would a people's government handle dissent? Well, I think that we should have a society where all dissent is tolerated. We should have a society with absolute freedom of all kinds. However, we're not there yet. And until we get there, there's going to be a struggle between the workers and the bosses, between the imperialists and the anti-imperialists. And as much as we talk about these things in vague classless terms, total free speech, total freedom of the press, I would like that. I believe in that. I will fight for that. And that's why I'm with the civil libertarian. That's why communists started the ACLU. Little known fact. However, we ain't there. And until we get to the ideal world of total freedom, it's going to be a push and pull. And just like the capitalist government of the United States is cracking down on our freedoms right now, try and stay in power, there are communist governments around the world that are in very different circumstances than we have here in the United States, with a lot of instability and poverty and drug gangs, and they have obviously had to deal with issues like freedom of speech differently than we have. Well, it sucks. I want there to be more freedom of speech and freedom of assembly in China. I want there to be more freedom of speech and freedom of assembly in North Korea and Cuba. But in those countries that are in very different circumstances than our country, it's a push and pull. And if you want there to be more freedom in Cuba, if you want there to be more freedom in China, if you want there to be more freedom in North Korea, stop the military threats against them. Let them do business on the world market. Let them utilize foreign investment to build up their economies. Don't force them into a situation where they have to lock down, where they're under threat and under attack. No country becomes authoritarian because evil leaders want that. They become authoritarian because they are surrounded, they're under attack. And the way that we can have a free and prosperous society is to trade, to have open markets internationally, let countries trade with one another, let countries do business together. That's the way to have, that is the way to have an open society. So that is my word on that, and I would hope that there can always be the maximum level of freedom. I believe in freedom, but we moralize it. We make it a right and wrong. The good countries have freedom, the bad countries don't. It's not that simple. The road to freedom is economic abundance. The road to freedom is brotherhood and friendship between countries. The road to freedom is open access and technological development. Freedom is linked to economics. Growth is freedom. Growth is freedom. Growth is the road to freedom, and degrowth and depopulation is the road to slavery. I engage with these questions on a much deeper level than any of the clowns who teach political science in America do. I'm just being honest with you. What I just stated here about the economic relationship, well, there was no one talking about freedom anywhere in the world until the 1400s in Europe, and that wasn't because people were just bad people until then. I understand the relationship between freedom and development, between the economic base of society and the superstructure, institutions like government and religion and the family and these things. I have an understanding that is far deeper and more profound than any of the clowns who lecture us about freedom and America's spreading freedom around the world. What I am giving you on this stream is very sophisticated and very serious. And it is way smarter, and that's why we're suppressed, and that's why we're shadow banned, and that's why social media is rigged against us. Because we have an understanding of this that is deeper. So I hope that that was an answer to your question, Gleb. It was a long, roundabout, complicated way of answering it. But there's a lot that needs to be said because these things are not simple. And it's infuriating when people try to make them simple. Next question is about Mengistu in Ethiopia. Mengistu was the leader of the Derg. Ethiopia was an empire. The emperor of Ethiopia was Haile Selassie. Haile Selassie was the emperor of Ethiopia. Italy invaded Ethiopia and forced him into exile. He spent World War II living in Britain. He dated Sylvia Pankhurst, the anarchist, which is kind of hilarious. But Sylvia Pankhurst was this famous feminist anarchist who Lenin had a fight with. She dated Haile Selassie. They had a fling during the Second World War. A little weird. And then after that, Haile Selassie went back to Ethiopia. He was put back on his throne. It was the Christian kingdom of Ethiopia, and Haile Selassie was the emperor. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he died, right? I believe he died. By the way, Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia, is who Rastafarians worship. The Rastafarian religion in Jamaica worships Haile Selassie. They believe he was the second coming of Jesus. He toured Jamaica, and when he toured, he waved his hand, and many people claimed they could see the stigmata on his hands. They thought he was the second coming of Jesus. He was the Black Messiah. That's a big part of the Rastafarian religion. Anyway, Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia, either he died or what happened? He died, I believe, right? But after he died, did he die or what happened? It was the Derg came to power, and the Derg was a section of the Ethiopian military. Yeah, did he? Yeah. No, he was removed. Yeah, he was overthrown. Right. What happened? He was overthrown in a military coup. Yes, he was overthrown in 1974. The military of Ethiopia, many of which had received Soviet military training, overthrew Haile Selassie. Wanted to check my facts there. He didn't. He was overthrown and he died a year later. But he was toppled. The military toppled Haile Selassie, and the leader of the new government that emerged was called the Council, or the Derg, the DERG, the Derg, and it was run by Mengistu. Very good question. Mengistu was the emperor. I'm sorry. Mengistu was the leader of the Derg, which was the council. It was the revolutionary government that took power. It was the pro-Soviet wing of the military of Ethiopia, overthrew Haile Selassie and established power in 1974. Cuba sent its military to Ethiopia to work with them, to help them carry out literacy campaigns. They redistributed land in Ethiopia. There was mass land redistribution. The Soviet Union built some factories there, and Mengistu briefly, they came to power. Now, immediately, the United States barricaded the country. There was a famine, a man-made famine, essentially barricading them, and the USA was trying to overthrow them. And there was a civil war. Eritrea had been fighting against Haile Selassie, and the USA started arming the Maoists in Eritrea to wage a proxy war against the Derg, and Haile Selassie was the leader of Ethiopia. I'm sorry, Mengistu was the leader of Ethiopia, and he lost power in the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken. In the 1990s, 1991, Soviet Union fell, and he was toppled, and it was actually an Enver Hoxha aligned party that overthrew him, which is now one of the major parties in Ethiopia, like the People's Democratic Party, something like that. But yes, Mengistu was the leader of Ethiopia when it was a Soviet-aligned country from 1974 to 1991. I understand Mengistu lives now in Zimbabwe. He fled to Zimbabwe, and the ZANU government of Zimbabwe, the Robert Mugabe government in Zimbabwe, has given him what do you call it? Refuge or asylum, and he lives in Zimbabwe. And that's where he lives. And he has published an autobiography, which I would really like to read. I just cannot find a copy of it. I would really love to read his autobiography. He sounds like a dynamic figure. Now, I was in the Workers' World Party for many years, and the Workers' World Party had a very close relationship with the Derg. Deirdre Griswold, who was the leader of the Workers' World Party, went to Ethiopia many times, and she met Mengistu on many occasions. She wrote 2 books about her experiences in Ethiopia. I worked with Deirdre Griswold. We didn't always get along, but Deirdre Griswold is a very important activist. She was the daughter of Vince Copeland, who was the founder of the Workers' World Party, and she frequently visited Ethiopia during the socialist years. During the 1970s and 80s, she frequently visited Ethiopia, and she was friends with Mengistu. She considered Mengistu to be one of her friends. And Cuba, Fidel Castro was very close to Mengistu, and then Cuba did a lot to support Mengistu and the government of Ethiopia. It was an attempt to build socialism. Now, the land redistribution has not, there hasn't been a full counter-revolution in Ethiopia. And some of the socialist institutions, like the land redistribution and the collectives that were built, like the commune, the collective farms that were built, are still in existence. But overall, things in Ethiopia, in the 1990s, it was pretty clear they were moving away from socialism after Mengistu was overthrown. The pro-U.S. forces had seized power. That was pretty clear. So, Ethiopia, and again, it was a bloody civil war, and a lot of people got killed, and there was, again, the conditions in these countries, These countries that have been kept chronically poor by the imperialists, where the people are, you know, very, very poor and hungry, and the imperialists are arming people and stuff. The conditions in these countries are very bad, right? And it's like, if you read the Wikipedia page for Mengistu, you're going to read that he was a brutal, evil murderer. But it's like, what was he up against, right? He was trying to raise his country out of poverty. He was a leader of the military. He overthrew the emperor. You know, he tried with Soviet aid. He tried to wipe out illiteracy, tried to build up his country. Immediately, the USA is sending people in with guns and arming the Eritrean resistance and those groups. And, you know, not a good situation. The country already is underdeveloped. There's mass malnutrition there. It's an impoverished African country. I mean, it's like, we don't understand. We can't relate. And there's this arrogance. A lot of times, communists, they think that when you have a revolution, you get a blank sheet of paper, tabula rasa, and you can just write whatever you want on it because you just had a revolution. It does not work that way, right? Imagine that you were Mengistu, right? Ethiopia is chronically poor. There's separatist civil wars going on, and the emperor, you know, has ruled it for a long time, Haile Selassie, and then you and the Soviet-aligned military, you take control. So what do? Right? People have this arrogance, like, oh, I would immediately turn Ethiopia into a socialist paradise. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. What would you do? Well, you might bring in some Cuban literacy volunteers and Cuban doctors to help provide services to the people. You might have the Soviet Union come and build some factories. You might, you know, have to fight a civil war against the people who want to overthrow you. I mean, you might redistribute the land. Well, they did all of that, you know, and, you know, was it pretty? No, but it's like, I mean, it's like these countries, you don't understand the circumstances that they're in. And that's why when people say socialism failed, it infuriates me, because it's like these countries have been up against everything. They have been up against everything. They have had nothing. And with the awful circumstances they've been built, they've achieved miracles. Right? Gaddafi. Libya had the highest life expectancy in the African continent. It built the world's largest irrigation system, wiped out illiteracy, wiped out no unemployment. I mean, what Gaddafi did, an impoverished country called Libya, that he just made it grow astronomically. That's a miracle. And people are like, oh yeah, but you know, human rights. It's like, okay, you're right. And it's Libya, and you don't understand what these countries are up against. You do not understand the conditions these people are facing. You've not been, you know, I've been to Djibouti on the Horn of Africa, and I've seen the conditions people live in there. Right? I mean, I was in Ecuador in the middle of a man-made famine caused by neoliberalism, where hundreds of thousands of people were starving to death because of U.S. imperialism and the U.S. dollar. You have no idea the conditions these countries are in. So when a revolutionary government takes power in these countries and it wipes out illiteracy and it builds power plants and it builds universal housing, and it's like these countries, they're starting to march ahead. And what these countries have achieved is massive. And it's like people just want to belittle that, and they have no idea. And you look at what China is today and what it used to be. You look at what the Soviet Union was before the communists came into power and what they made it into, a country that could withstand a Nazi invasion, could conquer outer space. You have no idea. You have absolutely no idea. Great things were achieved by Mengistu under circumstances that we could never imagine. And human rights were violated, absolutely. And innocent people got killed, absolutely. And there were things, you don't understand the conditions that Ethiopia was in 1974. We in the first world cannot relate to any of that. And we shouldn't try to copy it, because socialism in America is not going to look anything like that. It's going to be completely different because they're in different circumstances. But the judgment, right, the condemnation, you have no clue. You have no clue. And everything that they achieved was achieved in the face of circumstances that are beyond our comprehension. So I just want to make that clear, right? And I wish people could have this kind of perspective. I really, really get tired of the arrogance, you know, and the judgment, right? And it's like, you have no idea. All right, next question. the best accomplishments of People's Korea. Universal housing. There are no homeless people in North Korea. Did you know that? Universal housing. There is no homeless people in North Korea. In America, we've got all kinds of housing. We still have massive homelessness. There is no homelessness in North Korea. What other achievements of North Korea? Well, they're a country that is historically impoverished, that is cut off from the global economy, and they have launched their own satellites into orbit. That's pretty damn awesome. That's a pretty big achievement. You know, the GDP growth rates in North Korea prior to the fall of the Soviet Union were massive. In fact, I often quote, there's a BBC article that talks about how in the 1970s, 1960s, and 70s, they often referenced the North Korean economic miracle. North Korea's economy grew very rapidly during the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. They had rapid industrialization. They built a modern educational system. They built a modern hospital system. When they were rapidly industrializing with the aid of the Soviet Union, they achieved many great things. Now, in the 1990s, the Soviet Union collapsed, and they had worked really, really hard to achieve what is understood to be, what they called food independence. North Korea is the part of the Korean Peninsula with all the mountains in it, right? And doesn't have all the farmland. All the farmland's in South Korea. But North Korea, because they're isolated, they worked really, really hard to develop food independence, where they didn't have to rely on imported food. However, they needed imported oil. They needed petroleum for those tractors. They needed gasoline for their tractors. And what happened? Well, the Soviet Union fell, and oil was only available in the petrodollar. Oil was only available in the petrodollar. Oil was only available in the petrodollar. And because oil was only available in the petrodollar, they couldn't get any oil in North Korea. And their food system came to a grinding halt. Even though they had fields on the side of mountains and all that, they couldn't get any oil. That was a disaster. Many people starved to death in the 1990s. It was awful. The USA basically used the fact that the USA dominates the oil markets and prevented North Korea from getting dollars. They couldn't do business with American banks or whatever. And North Korea had a huge catastrophe they call the Arduous March in North Korea. It was awful. And it was imposed on North Korea. The United States did this to North Korea to try and starve them out. They hoped that the government of North Korea would fall. But it didn't. Any other government on earth would have fallen under those circumstances. However, North Korea, because it is a very well-organized revolutionary government, because the Korean Workers' Party has done so much to win the loyalty of the people, they didn't collapse under those circumstances. So that is, when the imperialists are using hunger as a weapon against you, they're trying to just lock you out of the global economy. What the US imperialists did in the 1990s, they did it to Cuba, they did it to Iraq, and they did it to North Korea. They just locked these countries out of the global economy and used hunger as a weapon, used medicine as a weapon. They killed millions of people in North Korea. They killed millions of people in Iraq. In Cuba, they didn't kill millions of people, but they made life hell. I mean, Cuba, they didn't have electricity. They didn't have electricity for most of the day, right, in the 90s. People who went to Cuba in the 90s, the lights went off, after a certain time of day because the electricity was so limited. I mean, it was bad. It was very, very bad in Cuba in the 90s. That's how evil the imperialists are. 1990s, they turned the screws on and tried to destroy Cuba. They turned the screws on and tried to destroy Iraq, and eventually did. They eventually invaded Iraq. And on top of that, they then, turned the screws on and tried to destroy North Korea. North Korea withstood that. Right? North Korea, the imperialists particularly hate North Korea because North Korea is the epitome. Everything that they don't think is possible. North Korea is an illiberal country. The Korean Workers' Party, Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, Kim Il-sung, Juche ideology, the imperialists, it scares them because it shows that come hell and high water, they can withstand. And that is why I feel a particular love for North Korea. I feel a very particular love for North Korea because of everything they've been up against. Because of how many people in North Korea have been killed by the Americans. You know, the USA bombed every single building about 1 story tall in North Korea. In the 1990s, when I was a kid living in a prosperous United States, North Koreans were literally starving to death because of our government. And when I went to Quito, Ecuador in 2013, North Koreans hugged me. They called me their comrade. And if you don't understand how moving that is, you don't understand what that means. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? The Americans killed millions of your people. I was hugged by Koreans who were older than I was, who were kids when millions of people were starving to death because of what America was doing to their country. And they saw me, one of the evil imperialist devils, and they hugged me and they called me their comrade. And they did it again when I saw them in Sochi, Russia in 2017. You have no idea. You have no idea. And that is part of the reason that Donald Trump is better than Joe Biden. Donald Trump was bad in a lot of ways, but Donald Trump is better than Joe Biden. And I will show you why Donald Trump is better than Joe Biden. And if you can't understand this, if you're going to poo-poo this, you know, I don't know what to say to you. Donald Trump is better than Joe Biden. And anyone with an anti-imperialist bone in their body should recognize that Donald Trump is better than Joe Biden because of this. That is why Donald Trump is better than Joe Biden. That alone, if Donald Trump had done nothing else in his presidency but that alone would make him better than Joe Biden. Tulsi Gabbard wants to continue this. Donald Trump wants to continue this. And the Center for Political Innovation, we want to continue this. We will do everything in our power to make peace between America and North Korea, to bring the troops home from South Korea, to work for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We will do everything in our power to do that. Everything. Everything possible. We will do everything we can. We will do everything possible to make that happen. Let me show you another picture. Show you another picture. Hold on. Hold on. Many of you probably know what picture this is going to be. I'm going to show it to you again because it's so gosh darn important. Here's another picture. That's us at the White House in March. That's Sam Bismuth-Hertz. That's Timoshenko. That's Olympia Logic. That's another friend of ours named Marissa. And that is our banner. Finish what Trump started. Peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Trump and Kim shaking hands. Finish what Trump started. This is the kind of solidarity North Korea needs. North Korea doesn't need wokeism. North Korea doesn't give a shit about, if we had a rally for transgenderism, we had a rally for gay marriage, that doesn't mean shit to North Korea. But this, in fact, there were people out in front of the White House with this banner. That meant the world to the North Koreans. I can't wait for the day that we, Center for Political Innovation, can go to North Korea and the North Koreans can come to America. I can't wait for that day. We need to finish what Trump started. We need to move toward peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Anyhow, all right. We got a lot more super chats to answer. Insights regarding Otto Warmbier. It's an awful situation. It's a horrible thing. I mean, look, that guy, I guess he was doing missionary work. He committed some kind of crime in North Korea. And North Korea is a country that's in awful circumstances. He was arrested for stealing government property in North Korea. And in the process of his imprisonment, he became ill. Maybe the conditions of his imprisonment were not good. I don't know exactly the details. Not a doctor. But he came back to the United States and he died. And it's awful. It's tragic. It's an awful thing that happened. And, I pray for his family. I pray for his mother and his father, and I would never want to belittle what that family has gone through. Awful. Their son, I guess he was doing Christian missionary work in North Korea. He made a bad decision, did something stupid, tried to steal something. And, it's bad. It's awful. And I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's a very sad thing. But you know what? It was pretty awful for 4 million people in North Korea who died when the U.S. imperialists bombed and destroyed that country during the Korean War, bombed every building above 1 story tall. It was pretty awful also. Pretty awful for the millions of people, 1 to 2 million people, maybe less than that, who died because they couldn't get food in the 1990s because the United States blocked them out of the world economy. Yeah, that was pretty awful also. It's pretty awful for all the democratic activists in South Korea who got disappeared under the national security law. All the peaceful protesters who marched against Park Chung-hee, marched for democracy against military rule, and got tortured to death and disappeared. There's a lot of pain on all sides. Reconciliation. We don't have to pretend that North Korea never does anything wrong. We don't have to become blind apologists. Reconciliation. Reconciliation. Reaching out the hand of friendship. Offering love instead of hate. Right? If you want life to be better in North Korea, do business with North Korea. That's what I got to say. So, next question. Is it possible to create socialism in one city? No. In the context of, no. I mean, in theory, if one city became an entire country and then controlled its means of production, possibly. That raises the question of, can you even have socialism in one country? I mean, yes, you can, but that socialism is always going to be suffering because it's surrounded by capitalism, right? I mean, socialism everywhere is always going to have to deal with being surrounded by capitalism until it becomes the dominant system in the world. In theory, a revolutionary government could take power like the Paris Commune of 1871, and they could achieve good things. And you could, in theory, have a city-state that was socialist, I guess. But that socialism would be very limited by the fact that it was only a city and it was surrounded by capitalism. You know, socialism is a set of productive relations. Socialism is when the economy is organized, centrally planned, and there's not profits in command. However, prior to socialism, there's something called the dictatorship of the proletariat. And the dictatorship of the proletariat is when the working class and revolutionary anti-capitalist forces seize control of the government, right? And then dictatorship of the proletariat. We live under the dictatorship of the capitalists right now. Right now, the government is under the control of the capitalists. But the idea is that if the working class got together, we built an anti-monopoly coalition, and we took control of the government. We replaced the FBI and the Pentagon, and we created a new FBI to serve the people, a new military that would serve the people. We'd have the dictatorship of the proletariat. And you could see a dictatorship of the proletariat in one city. And if that city had a lot of factories and power plants and oil wells in it, in theory, one could see socialist property relations in one city, right? So there you go. But it's a three-stage process. First, you have the creation of a united front. The united front, polarization of society. Are you for this? Are you against this? One side is led by the working class and the revolutionary forces. The other side is led by the current order. The united front is formed. When the united front takes power, it then has to recreate the government to serve the working class. So when the government is recreated, new military, new police, etc., you have the dictatorship of the proletariat. And then with the dictatorship of the proletariat, you can then have a government that oversees the establishment of socialist property relations. In theory, all three of those things could happen in one city, but even in just one country, it's still limited, right? Until socialism is the dominant system in the world, it's going to have to trade on a world market with capitalist countries, and this is the whole Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky debate. Trotsky said you couldn't build socialism in one country. He was wrong, but he was right in that socialism in one country is going to be somewhat limited. It's going to be somewhat limited. So he was pointing to a true fact, but he used it to say something that wasn't true, that then it was pointless. You couldn't have socialism until you had a revolution in the Western countries, until socialism was the dominant system in the world. That's what Trotsky argued with his theory of permanent revolution. Well, that was wrong. But was he pointing toward a true reality that the Soviet Union, because it was surrounded by Western capitalism, the socialism it had was limited in what it could achieve? That's true. All right. How come we live in a society where there's no emotional intelligence for our children? Everything seems so cold and emotionally unstable. Couple things. First of all, I think there are emotions being projected at everyone 24 hours a day. Gabby, the media, the screens, our phones, the TV, the advertising, everywhere you go, every store you go into, they're blasting a song at you, and you're just constantly having emotions projected at you, right? And kids grow up with this their whole life. Everywhere they go, they got a screen pointed at them, they got a radio playing at them, they got a TV pointed at them, they got just their whole life they're being bombarded with emotions. And because of that, they grow cold, right? And I think this is my theory. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just telling you I'm speculating. I feel like part of why so many kids are on the spectrum these days, they have that kind of coldness that comes with autism. I think there's a connection there. Now, I'm not a scientist, so I'm just giving you my personal opinion, not a medical doctor, not a psychologist, not a neurologist. I'm just telling you my theory. I think that's what's going on. And I think that's why it's really important. I try to limit my own screen time. I try to make myself listen to classical music rather than the emotional music that exists out there. I do my best to try and limit my consumption, because, you just get overloaded. I mean, you just get overloaded. There's just so much emotion everywhere that your ability to react to emotions, when King Kong, the movie, came out, people were on the edge of their seats. They thought it was really exciting. I couldn't finish it. I was bored with King Kong. The old 1930s King Kong. I just couldn't. It was boring because it was all about the special effects, and the special effects nowadays, or nothing like it. So, the emotional music, the emotional TV and imagery, the sexualization, the pornographication, the loud, intense emotions everywhere. And that has an impact. It has a toll on people psychologically. That makes people colder, I would argue. The other thing I would argue, I was talking to a friend about this the other night. A lot of this self-help stuff is a little toxic. A lot of this self-help stuff has people acting stupid. I don't know how much I want to get into this. Look, the self-help stuff, a lot of it is very individualist, and it's all about you can go out and achieve your dreams, seize your moment, and all of that. And I've seen a number of people in my life act a fool and make very poor decisions based on the fact that they consume a little bit too much self-help material. And that so a lot of people are struggling. The economy is getting worse. And so a lot of people have it in their heads that, well, if I listen to enough self-help and I listen to Jordan Peterson and I listen to all of this and I learn to seize the moment and blah, 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 I'm going to go out. And I've seen a lot of people act a fool because that self-help material tells you that all the problems in your life are individual. It says, if you just have the right attitude, if you just, everything will work out. And no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I mean, we're in a bad situation, right? And a lot of these self-help people, they have this delusion that everyone who's not succeeding, it's their own fault and all of that. And, you can check all the right boxes and you can do everything you're supposed to do. And we still have a shitty economy. And there's still, the capitalist system still doesn't have room for a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that really internalize a lot of this self-help stuff. And they really believe the only reason they haven't gotten ahead is they haven't, followed the 48 rules of power or the 12 rules for life or whatever. And so based on trying to follow the self-help shit, they act a fool. And there are two individuals I can think of who acted a fool. They made my life difficult, but they hurt themselves way more than they hurt me in the long run. And, I know that that's because these people, I know both of them, and they just consume this self-help content nonstop, and they project it onto circumstances where it doesn't apply, right? At the end of the day, not everyone is going to get famous. Not everyone is going to be a Hollywood actor. Not, you know what I mean? Some things in life are not meant to be resolved that way. And that self-help stuff, if you're studying the way people get famous, right? And I've seen people act a fool. I've seen people act a fool. And they think that they're, they got their one shot. This is their one shot. No, it's not. And, there are times where that stuff can be applied in a useful way. But there's a lot of people who apply that self-help stuff in a really stupid way. And they hurt themselves. So there you go. Yeah, and honestly, you should be able to have a comfortable life and not have to apply any of that. Right? You should be able to have a comfortable life, get a decent job, raise a family, without having to, but a lot of people, because they're struggling to just have a basic existence, to just make a living, they get caught up in that self-help stuff, and it gets them to act like very selfish assholes, and they end up hurting themselves in the long term. And they think they're following the 8 rules, the 12 rules, they're fucking up, right? But look, I'll just tell you this, right? No one likes to be lied to. Number one, no one likes to be lied to. No one likes to be taken advantage of. People can tell if you have genuine empathy. And if you're being a phony. Number three, a good friend is one of the most valuable things you can ever have. I'm just telling you that. In the short term, it doesn't seem that way, right? In the short term, you know, oh, I'm going to get clicks, I'm going to get likes and all that. But in life, sometimes the best thing to have is a good friend. And sometimes if you really want to get ahead in the long term, not the short term, but in the long term, the best thing you need is a good friend. Right? And the people who really get ahead, I'm just telling you this, the people who get ahead in business, the people who get ahead in politics, are people who have a good friend and they maintain long-term relationships with people. They can get through the good, they can get through the bad, they can distance themselves at times. You know, if a friend is moving in the direction in life where he's not someone you can interact, they can step away. But the people that are able to hold on to lasting relationships, they get very far in life. And it does not seem obvious. There are people, I'm thinking about events that have gone on in my life over the last couple of years. There are people who have come in and out of my life. Didn't hear from them for 3 or 4 years. They come back. Those are some of the most important people I know. Are the people whose life intersects with mine in different ways, right? And the people that I have some kind of bond with, despite my differences. And despite me moving in one direction and them moving in another, that bond can stay intact. You're able to preserve a valuable bond like that. Or somebody, they drift out of your life, but then 3, 4 years later, they drift right back into your life, and that bond is still there. That is really valuable. Do not underestimate the value of a good friend. That's not something you're going to read in self-help books. Self-help books is all about you. All about you. It's all about glibness, and you're not going to read this in self-help books, but I'm telling you, sometimes you should be thankful for bad things happening to you, because even though they suck at the moment, you learn from them, and it also lets you know who your real friends are. Sometimes you need to test relationships. You shouldn't do it intentionally, but sometimes things come along and they show you that there are people, there are people who you don't need around. And there are other people that are very valuable to you. And that is my advice. Anyway, next question. What would you pick as the national anthem of the socialist USA? Well, it's interesting because that question is often posed in leftist circles, right? And people say, this land is your land. People say the Black national anthem, lift every voice and sing. People give different answers. I'll tell you what I think the national anthem should be in the socialist United States. And again, this is just my opinion. I'm not proclaiming this on behalf of CPI. And ultimately, by the time we get socialism in the United States, so many Americans are going to have to be in motion. So many people are going to be doing stuff and be well organized that it's not going to be up to me. Let me just put it that way. I would make the battle hymn of the Republic the anthem of the United States. And people say that, well, Caleb, that's like a U.S. Army song. Look at the context, right? The Battle Hymn of the Republic started out as a tent revival song of the Second Great Awakening. Hey, brother, will you meet us? And it was about the American people coming together and realizing that the country was moving in a bad direction because of slavery, that they needed to repent, they needed to turn their lives around. The Second Great Awakening, you had the tent preachers going around and saying, we as a country need to repent from the evil sin of slavery. And they would begin their tent revival meetings by singing, hey, brother, will you meet us? Hey, brother, will you meet us? And it was a song of the Great Awakening, pushing, turn your life around, repent so you can go to heaven, repent from the sin of slavery. Then, when John Brown led his heroic raid on Harper's Ferry to try and lead an uprising against slavery, and he was killed, As the Civil War began, soldiers in the Union Army that admired John Brown, they rewrote the lyrics to Hey Brother, Will You Meet Us? And they made it, John Brown's body is a rotting in the grave. John Brown. And it was an honor. They saw John Brown. They were continuing John Brown's legacy. His soul is marching on. His truth is marching on. That's what it became. It was soldiers marching into battle saying that we're finishing what John Brown started. We're finishing what John Brown started. We are marching into battle. We are marching into battle. We are finishing what John Brown started. So there you go. And then, because it was not good PR for the U.S. Army to have all these soldiers singing a song in honor of a guy who got hung for treason, and because the Union Army was constantly trying to recruit people who didn't want to fight against slavery, they were trying to build a united front, and they were trying to explain, well, it's not about slavery, even though it was, right? The ruling class was constantly screaming at the top of their lungs, this is not about slavery, but it was about slavery. And they ended up having to abolish slavery at the end of the war. Emancipation Proclamation. Because the Union Army wanted better PR, they hired a guy to take that tune and rewrite it as the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And the Battle Hymn of the Republic, along with the Battle Cry of Freedom, those became the anthems of one of the greatest moments in American history. They had hidden the Civil War from us. The Civil War was a great moment in American history. Harriet Tubman became the first woman to lead soldiers into battle. She raided plantations along the Combahee River, freeing slaves. There was a Marxist division of the Union Army that carried the red flag as their regimental emblem as they marched into battle. So many, they started redistributing the land, 40 acres and a mule. Frederick Douglass became friends with Abraham Lincoln. Like, the U.S. Civil War was one of the rare examples of the American capitalist class being forced by historical circumstances to enter an alliance with the working class, with the small farmers, in order to play a revolutionary role. And it was a revolutionary moment in American history. And Karl Marx wrote for the New York Tribune, the newspaper of the Republican Party of New York City. And he wrote glowing articles about Abraham Lincoln. What a great hero he was, the single-minded son of the working class. And so if it was up to me, I would make the Battle Hymn of the Republic the anthem of a socialist United States. And on that note, folks, that is the last question I've got. I'm going to end tonight's stream. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.